Look at these goats. Such videos gain millions of views, and some of them become memes. You may even have dropped them off to one of your friends. Look, it's you when it's time to pay the rent. But the goats themselves are not so much fun. Nature played a cruel joke on them, giving them a strange feature of falling into paralysis from fright. Imagine that this will happen next to a cliff when thunder thunders. Yes, they all just fall down. SOSO superpower. But the goats didn't choose it, just like the ants didn't choose blindness. In order not to go astray, they secrete special pheromones and follow each other. But sometimes an unexpected failure occurs in the ant algorithm and insects begin to walk in a circle. Gradually, more and more brothers join them. It looks like an ant pit, but the ants continue their run until they drop dead. The circle rotates until the participants are completely exhausted, and only then the ants can follow on, leaving behind hordes of dead. This can last for hours or even days, until someone suddenly wakes up and takes the surviving brethren away. For the first time, this strange phenomenon was described by William Beebe back in the 20s of the last century. Then he came across an ant mill, with a circumference of about 370 meters. For comparison, the famous Devil's Tower is about 100 meters lower. Can you imagine the size? Not only ants have similar problems. Fish, for example, form gyrations, but confused rats look much more terrible. Look at this picture. It looks like some kind of modern art or props for a horror movie, but no, these are real rats that tangled their tails and died of hunger. A terrible and ridiculous death. For the first time, such a phenomenon was discovered in 1564 and gave it the name Rat King. Yeah, the one from the Nutcracker. According to the hypothesis, rats gather in a king when their flexible tails are glued together with the help of sebum, secretions, and food residues. This mixture acts as an adhesive and can harden during sleep, especially in the cold season. As soon as the rats realize that they are trapped, they begin to fight and the knot tightens even tighter. Eventually the animals die. Until now, people have not been able to find a single living rat king, and in principle this phenomenon is very rare. Previously, rats who died such a terrible death were considered a very bad sign. In general, it is not surprising, because where there are rats, there are diseases. This is not usually said about spiders. Spiders are generally quite useful guys, although people don't particularly like them. But this creature was really unlucky. He has been in captivity for 20 million years. Once a spider got into a drop of resin and was trapped in it forever. Just like this dog. Okay, she's certainly not 20 million years old or even a million, and the poor animal is stuck not in the resin, but right in the whole tree. But just imagine how surprised people were when they discovered this. Loggers who worked in southern Georgia in the 1980s simply cut down another tree and calmly loaded it into a truck. Then one of the group members accidentally looked into the hollow of the trunk and, possibly, turned gray. The perfectly mummified remains of a dog looked at him from the inside. Her teeth were still bared. Experts who studied the find came to the conclusion that the dog, most likely in the 1960s, chased a squirrel and got stuck in a tree trunk. The animal climbed too high, could not turn around and died. But instead of becoming food for other inhabitants of the forest, the dog turned into a mummy. The wood of the chestnut tree in which she was stuck prevented decomposition. The dry environment inside the trunk protected from the weather and sucked moisture out of the body. And this is a unique case. Usually any dead body becomes a victim of insects, especially in the forest. Scientists even use their voracity to clean skeletons. Some beetles can even handle the body of a deer. Poor guy. He not only got stuck in the settlement, but also became food. But let's not deny the obvious fact, the bugs did a great job. Just look, the bones are perfectly cleaned. However, the deer may well be given a second life. Not literally, of course, no necromancy, but at least one person would be happy to include the poor guy in his collection. Well, partially. Jim Phillips has more than 16,000 antlers of deer, elk and antelope. And he simply found all the elements of his collection. It took more than 60 years, but how many horns did you find? Exactly. This guy is really good at searching. But let's leave people with their strange hobbies and return to animals with their strange habits. One of them is autocannibalism. Yeah, you heard right. Some of the inhabitants of the animal world literally devour themselves. Surely you have met somewhere a story about snakes who are so fond of lunch that they do not notice when the sacrifice ends and their tale begins. In reality, everything is a little different. A snake can actually start eating itself, but only by mistaking the movement of its tail for the movement of prey. Honestly, I don't know which of these options looks more ridiculous. If snakes could feel awkward, they would be shocked by themselves. But the situation with this male hummingbird is not funny. He is on the verge of starvation. The metabolism of these tiny birds is incredibly fast. Just 2 hours without nectar is enough for hunger to kill a hummingbird. Some of them have to collect food from 2,000 flowers every day, just to survive. Now the life of birds doesn't seem so free anymore, does it? And metabolism isn't the only problem. The most ordinary rain turns into a real bombardment for hummingbirds. In such conditions it is impossible not only to eat, but even to fly, and precious time is running out. But let's imagine that everything is fine with the male hummingbird, which cannot be said about this moose, because he has become a zombie. Not in the cinematic sense of the word, of course. He does not wander around the forest in search of the brains of his relatives, but everything is very wrong with his own brains. A brain worm. Such parasites are carried by white-tailed deer and in general do not particularly suffer from this fact. But once the brain worm is in the body of the moose, it rushes. Yes, to the brain. The worm tunnels right into the head of the unfortunate animal, causing a lot of neurological damage. In fact, the moose becomes a walking zombie by simply picking up a parasite and then dies. A terrible death for any living being. Of course, all these features of animals, their weaknesses and strengths do not appear by chance. It is worth saying thank you to evolution or, on the contrary, shouting something obscene at her. And although changes usually take thousands, even millions of years, sometimes evolution makes a leap. No, and they're not about the X-Men. It will be about elephants. Modern elephants have been wearing tusks for a hell of a long time. Before that, mammoths wore tusks. In general, nature knows for sure that these huge animals need them. Massive tusks are one of the most recognizable features and one of the main reasons why people are pushing elephants to extinction. In the 16th century, 26 million elephants roamed the African continent, and today there are less than 500,000 of them. By the 17th-18th years of the 20th century, poaching had reached a critical level. This is because for a long time people simply did not think that killing animals is bad. For example, the well-known Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, shot 512 different living creatures during a safari. There were elephants among them. The animals died not for entertainment, but to become exhibits in museums and so that scientists could study them. But, seriously, 512? Seriously, Teddy? It seems that this is too much. What can we say about elephants, which still suffer from the actions of poachers? Ivory is a luxury item in the Asian market. The larger the tusks, the more money poachers can get from their sale. More than $1,000 per kilogram. Tusks are used to create works of art, jewelry, and once they were even used as a material for piano keys. Unfortunately, elephants are under threat, and animal rights activists cannot protect them. And that's where evolution came to the rescue. In recent decades, several African parks have seen an increase in the number of elephants born without tusks. In general, this is easily explained. Individuals with large tusks become victims of poachers, which means that only those who are not of interest to criminals can reproduce. Pretty logical, right? Yes, human activity is simply impossible to ignore. Even if you are some tiny animal and you have your own problems. You've probably heard about the wall on the US-Mexico border. Its purpose is to separate the people of the country from each other. But what about animals? The border region is home to an incredible number of very different species. There are reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and all of them are not happy with such a fence. Especially representatives of rare and endangered species. The wall will change their range, greatly reducing the area in which the animals are accustomed to inhabit. This will not just cause discomfort, but can really threaten life. The animals will be deprived of some of their habitats, will not be able to go to a watering hole or escape from a fire. All they can do to resist the fire is to run away. But how to run when there is a huge wall in your way? Even a dwarf owl is in danger because it flies low above the ground. Take care of the animals. See you later.